Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. Well, it is Monday, so you know what that means. We're taking a look at Go Collect's hottest trending comics for the week of August 27th. Now, for those who don't know, Go Collect puts out bi-weekly articles that switch between hottest comics and trending comics. This week, we got trending comics again, which is a more curated list of books that are really starting to move a lot in terms of volume of sales in the market. But before I get into the list, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things I would appreciate. But let's get into this article here today. Of course, I will put a link in the description like I always do. Shoutouts to Matt Tuck. He always puts this list together, but I will break it down for you guys in case you don't like reading. But coming in here at the number 5 spot is this book right here, Invincible Iron Man #1, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 94th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 2016, written by Brian Michael Bendis, and would feature the first cover appearance in costume of Riri Williams' Ironheart. Now, we all know that Dominique Thorne has been cast as Riri Williams in the MCU. She will make her appearance in the Black Panther Wakanda Forever film coming out later this year. And then next year, she's getting her own Disney Plus series, appropriately called Ironheart. And this is one of the interesting key books that has been moving a lot in the market, associated to the excitement of Riri Williams. Now, I understand why people want to get this thing. It's got an absolutely beautiful cover. I love, the armor and how she looks against the sort of blue cloud backdrop. But one of the problems with this book, or I would say that one of the issues with this thing, in terms of it being a book that's going to go up in value, is that there's actually so many Riri Williams keys that it came out all around the same time that it's going to be hard for this one to ever really, go to the moon, so to speak, especially since it's not her true first appearance. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s have 1,360 on the census. Fair market value is suggested to be 110. 30-day moving is 105. So, as you guys can see, 9.8 for less than $100 really isn't that bad in my opinion. But it'll be interesting to see if this can match some of the record high sales that we got in 2021, where this was a book selling at double the price of that, around the $239 range. And then, of course, being a 2016 book, not going to see it slapped at the low grade, but typically speaking, when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies, you can find them being sold around that $25 to $30 range or so. All right, let's go on now to the second hottest trending comic of the week. And the second hottest trending comic of the week is one that is very cool, probably one of the better modern books there is out there in the market. But this one is Edge of SpiderVerse #2, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 92nd slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book written by Jason Latour that came out in 2014 and would feature the first appearance of Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman, otherwise known as Ghost Spider. Now, much like Miles Morales, I think Gwen Stacy as Spider-Gwen has really, catapulted themselves into, a top-tier character. They've really captured, the fandom of comic book collectors, these two characters in the SpiderVerse franchise. And I think the values of their respective books are definitely a testament to how popular they are. And I think that this book actually has a bright future in front of it. I mean, it does have a lot of different prints, so you got to be careful out there, focusing on whether you want to get the first print versus, say, print number 5. There's plenty of out there in the market, but it does feel like, Spider-Gwen has a long future ahead of her. Obviously, she's going to play a part in the Into the Spider-Verse film, which comes out next year. And there's been talks that, maybe the Sonyverse would explore a Spider-Gwen franchise. Perhaps Emma Stone would like to come back as Spider-Gwen and maybe do a film with Andrew Garfield. That's a lot of what people are speculating on. And with all those talks, I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing it on the list this week, because a lot of people are thinking that if she comes, onto the screen in some kind of live action film or TV show or whatever the case may be, this is definitely going to be a book that goes to the moon. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. There's actually 5 9.9s on the census. Last sale was back in 2015 for $2,200. Would be really curious to see what that would sell for today. But generally speaking, 9.8s, 3,052 on the census. So pretty high overall, especially at that 9.8 grade, especially when you factor in all the other various prints that exist for this comic book. But fair market value is $1,400, 30-day moving around the $1,500 range. This is a book that has had a decent pullback from its previous record highs. It was a book that was kind of selling at that $1,900 level back in 2021, just scratching the surface of the 2K mark, and kind of where it sits now, I think around 1425, 1570. I think that that's a pretty healthy floor for this book overall. And if we're comparing it to, that of the Miles book, which, say typically sells around the 3K level, it definitely seems like it's possible that this book could reach that high of $2,000 at some point in the future. And of course, being a 2014 book, not going to see it slabbed at the low grade, but typically when you go into eBay looking for raw copies, you might be able to find one around the $800 or $900 level. All right, let's move on now to the the third hottest trending comic of the week. And the third hottest trending comic of the week is one that has been trending all over the place. I'm sure this is a book that has come across your, top 10 list on whatever platform you're looking at. But this one right here is Web of Spider-Man number 118, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 90th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1994, written by Terry Kavanagh, that would feature the first appearance of the character known as Ben Reilly. Now, Ben Reilly is actually a clone of Peter Parker Spider-Man, kind of went into this, wonky comic book storytelling at the time in which this came out. I remember they even adapted this storyline into the animated Spider-Man cartoon, which I really enjoyed. But Ben Reilly has been kind of a character that a lot of Spider-Man fans have also been a fan of. I think, a lot of people say, that he has one of the best costume designs of all of the Spider-Verse characters, and I think a lot of people would generally agree with that. But one of the reasons why this book is trending this week is that, in the wave of what is to come with Into the Spider-Verse number 2 next year, there's actually been a leak of a board game that is coming out, and on the board game that is appropriating the art from the film and showing some of the characters, they actually had an image of Ben Reilly as being one of the characters in the board game. And you know how people do, speculators going to speculate, they put two and two together, and they're thinking, hey, if this is a Into the Spider-Verse official board game and we're seeing Ben Reilly on the cover art for it, well, surely that means that Ben Reilly is going to be showing up in the film, and that got the comic book market absolutely going nuts for this book. Everything was flying off the shelves. Definitely an interesting book. I'll be curious to see where the values go from here, especially as we get closer to Into the Spider-Verse, because one of the interesting things about this book is that it's actually one of the few books in 2022 that has been able to set its all-new record high with this announcement. So as we dig into the numbers here, we see at the 9.8 grade, there's only 218 on the census, which is not to suggest that this book is especially rare, but it does go to show that it's not so easy, at least in comparison to Edge of the Spider-Verse, to get that 9.8 grade. We'll see if the census continues to go up over the course of the next year, but fair market value for it suggests $900, 30-day moving above that at 988. And you can see right here from the graph, ever since this announcement, this is a book that has definitely skyrocketed and is now selling at its all-time record high in terms of comic book price. 2021 prices for this thing had jumped up to around the $500 level. So now we're basically almost twice of that at that basically four-figure plateau. So definitely interesting to see that. And then of course, 2014 book, not going to see it always slabbed at the low grade, but generally speaking, when you go onto eBay now looking for raw copies, it's going to set you back around the $100 level. All right, let's move on now to the second hottest trending comic of the week. And the second hottest trending comic of the week is definitely one that is kind of cool to talk about. A book that I feel like is every, comic book collector's sort of personal favorite Bronze Age book. But this one right here is X-Men number 101, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 62nd slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1976, written by Chris Claremont, and would feature the first appearance of the Phoenix. Now, of course, you guys all know the famous Phoenix storyline that involves Jean Grey. I mean, we've seen it a bazillion times in the Fox X-Men films. And this is definitely a book that has, gained a lot of traction over the course of those films, for comic book collectors. A lot of people loved to get their hands on this book. But it is interesting because it kind of feels like, we've seen that story so many times. I mean, would Kevin Feige want to retell the same story we've seen on the silver screen? I mean, there's so many other X-Men stories to tell that you have to wonder if maybe we're not going to get another Phoenix storyline, at least for the next, 15 to 20 years or so, depending on how long the MCU carries on. But that doesn't stop a lot of people from still speculating on this book because, as we think about the MCU and we think about all the, cosmic forces that come into play, we introduced Infinity and Thor Love and Thunder and things like that, it does make people wonder, is Marvel going to want to explain the Phoenix Force in some kind of way? And when we bring X-Men into the MCU, maybe there can be a different way they tell the story. And that's got a lot of people thinking that this might be a book that is very important to X-Men once they show up in the MCU. Perhaps we're going to get some cosmic explanations of the Phoenix Force, and that would definitely bring a lot of eyes onto this book. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Would you guys like to see the MCU do the Phoenix Force storyline again? It feels like it's kind of been tired at this point, but I do know that a lot of people love the storyline, and it feels like it could be a lot better than the last one we got. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s have 159 on the census. Fair market value for them is $7,500. 30-day moving is 83.15, which is actually higher than the 1-year average for this book. Now, while it's not necessarily setting its all-time record high, you can see that this is definitely a book that has picked up steam after having its pullback off of 2021. Last couple sales here are 7,000, 9,444. That actually could be a record high sale for this book, 8,500, 7,500. So definitely a book that is showing a very, very strong desire out there in the market. I mean, especially when you go down to the 9.6 grade, this is still a book that sells, at that 2K level, although the 30-day moving is down from the 1 year. So it's really the 9.8s that have been able to kind of command those premium prices overall. Of course, 1976 book starts to get less of a census at the low grade, but typically speaking, when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies, depending on the deal, depending on the grade you can find for yourself, maybe it's going to set you back around $250, or maybe you're going to have to spend around the $400 price point. All right, let's move on now to the hottest trending comic of the week. And the hottest trending comic of the week is one that is probably no surprise as to why it is selling a lot in the market. But this one right here is Savage She-Hulk #1, up 4 spots, now sitting in the #2 slot, the second most bought and sold book out there in the market. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this would be the first appearance of the character known as She-Hulk, aka Jennifer Walters, a book that came out in 1980, written by Stan Lee. Now, as we all know, She-Hulk is currently going on Disney+. A lot of the She-Hulk books are moving in the market. People are speculating on Frogman, people are speculating on Porcupine, and people, of course, are picking up Savage She-Hulk #1 here. But this is a book that I think is really interesting to talk about, because remember, with these Go Collect lists that we're talking about volume of sales. We're talking about movement in the market here, not necessarily record high prices. But this is the instance where this book right here, although it's selling a lot in the market, this is a book that has absolutely tanked in terms of its value. And you have to wonder if people are selling this book simply because they don't want to touch this thing with a 10-foot pole anymore. Like, they want to get it out of their collection. They want to capitalize on all the books that are moving in the market. And so I think it's really interesting because, in my opinion, even though we have the show right now and presumably, the peak fervor, or what would be the peak fervor for this character, this is a book that has been selling for less than it was commanding, even all the way back in 2020 before we had the comic book boom. This is sort of getting the treatment of Gore the God Butcher, where the Gore the God Butcher book was selling for less at the time in which Thor Love and Thunder was coming out than it was selling for, when we initially got the announcement for the character. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about the future outlook for this book? I mean, I think in one way, it probably was overinflated, especially since there was a massive warehouse find for this thing, and there's a lot of copies out there in the market. But on the other hand, I actually think that where the prices are now, it's probably overcorrected. I think people are looking to get rid of their books right now, and so there's a lot of deals that are being put out there in the market. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s here have 2,469 on the census, or 2,469 on the census, I should say. Fair market value is $700. 1 year moving is 978. 30-day is 716. But I kind of want to dig in here and show you guys, how much this book has really, really fallen. I mean, look at the graph right there. This graph is probably as drastic as, what you saw with Eternals #1, where, some of the peak highs for this book was selling at that $1,450 range or so. And we've corrected all the way back down to 717. In fact, you can see some of the last sales here, 632, 635, 451, if that's actually a real sale, 700 here, another slash price of 700. So a lot of $600 sales. And if you go back to 2020, that was basically the price of what this book was selling for at that particular time. So, it's really interesting to think about how basically all of the gains that has been had for this book have generally been erased, even more so for that of the 9.6 grade, where the current 30-day moving average of $295, like basically $290 is selling for less than what this book was selling for in 2020. This was a book at the 9.6 grade that could usually get around $300. But I do think that this She-Hulk book is really interesting to talk about. It's really interesting to analyze this one, because I do think that it is, kind of a panic sale. I think a lot of people are looking to, capitalize on the height of the show and sell their books. And I have the, supposition that, when we move out a couple months from now after the show is over, I think the floor prices will actually be a lot more healthy when people are not trying to capitalize, so to speak. This is kind of an interesting thing that we're moving into with this current market where, you might be able to find better deals for certain books during the course of the show or during the course of, the movie, because a lot of people are trying to capitalize and sell their books and people are just sort of underbidding each other. So that's kind of an interesting thing I've been thinking about a lot. Let me know what you guys think about that theory overall. Anyways, that's all for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next video.